I'm Brianna, and welcome to Zynska, your resource for fashion information and apparel knowledge. And today we're going to be talking about cotton, which is it's interesting. There's a lot going on with cotton. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. It's a whole thing. Cotton is a cellulosic staple fiber, cellulosic meaning that it is plant-based, and staple fiber meaning that it comes in short little strings that have to be spun together into a longer thread. Cotton's staple fibers are usually about 3 centimeters long on average. Once the cotton is harvested and processed, it can be sold as a non-woven good, like cotton balls for example, or it can be spun and made into yarns so that it can be woven or knitted for textile applications. Cotton is known for being soft yet strong and very absorbent, making it appropriate for a variety of applications from blue jeans to bandages. It comes in 27 wild species currently, but the upland cotton variety is the most commonly grown to be used for textile products. In fashion, it's used for denim, it's used for t-shirts, you can also make dress shirts and even sweaters. But beyond that, it can also be used for towels and bed sheets, as well as coffee filters, Q-tips, and other hygienic products. It is highly absorbent. It's fairly strong. The strength is actually increased when wet versus silk, where the strength decreases. It's biodegradable, which is pretty cool. It's breathable, which is a big selling point for cotton. It has a good luster, it's inexpensive, easily dyeable, and irons at high temperatures. It's also easy to wash, especially in comparison with other fabrics. The downsides to this are that cotton has low resiliency, so when you stretch it out, it has a hard time stretching back. There are ways to get around this. You can blend it with cotton spandex, and so the spandex will give it some of that resiliency, but for the most part, once you stretch out cotton, it's going to be stretched out. It also, unfortunately, has a high water footprint. Like me, it is very thirsty, and so it uses a lot of water. It needs intense irrigation in order to be able to grow. On top of that, it has a lot of reliance on fertilizers and pesticides. Cotton also has a low resistance to sunlight, abrasion, acids, and decay from microorganisms. It's flammable. It will shrink slightly in hot water and dryers, and it takes a long time to dry and does not wick. So how is it grown? Cotton is derived from the seeds of a flowering shrub of the Gossypium genus. The cotton shrub blooms either annually or perennially, depending on factors such as climate. When the flower dies, it leaves behind a seed pod called a boll. Hair-like fibers spring from the seeds within, with each fiber being composed of a single elongated cell comprising of high amounts of cellulose. This cellulose eventually becomes 90% of the cell's weight, resulting in a fiber that, though still flexible, is very dense. This fibrous portion of the seed is known as lint. When the boll is mature, it opens up to reveal a fluffy mass of the cellulosic lint that can be picked and ginned for a variety of uses. Cotton plants prefer warm, sunny climates between 45 degrees north and 40 degrees south latitudes. The amount of moisture throughout the year can also play a large part in how well the crop develops, as it needs a lot of irrigation for growing, but dry weather for the harvesting season. The 3 global leaders in cotton production are India, China, and the US, and actually 40% of the US's cotton comes from Texas alone. When it comes time for harvesting, the cotton is either hand-picked or it's harvested by a mechanical cotton picker. Ideally, this happens as soon as the boll opens. Once the cotton is collected and, in industrial cases, packaged into large bales called modules, it is dried, cleaned, and passed through a gin, which separates the lint from the seeds by using rotating saw blades to pull the lint through a fine metal grid. The seeds are too large to pass through this grid and remain where they are, ready to be used for livestock feed or to be processed into cottonseed oil. The ginned cotton is packed into bales, sampled for quality, and shipped to textile mills where it can be spun into yarn or used for non-woven goods. The spinning process is where additional types of fibers, such as polyester, can be added to create blends. The dispersion of cotton is really, really big and complicated, and so here is just kind of a little short, pared down version of how it at first got dispersed, because archaeologists have had a field day with this one, because you find it everywhere. It can be found all over the world. It's widely believed to have been independently cultivated by several different civilizations, such as those of modern-day Egypt, Peru, Mexico, and India. From there, the cotton trade expanded, notably by the Gupta Empire into Asia, the Incan Empire into South America, and the Arabs into Spain and Italy. Alexander the Great is also credited with bringing cotton fabrics to Macedonia following his invasion of India. Sometime around 1350 AD, the spinning wheel was invented, which sped up the yarn-making process and made cotton a common textile in Europe during the Middle Ages. Later, around the 1490s, during the Age of Exploration, Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama found that he was able to sail directly to India, thus making long, dangerous, expensive trips by land unnecessary and opening up a better way to import Eastern goods like cotton. In addition, Christopher Columbus made his voyage to the New World also in the 1490s, where he found that cotton was already being cultivated by the native tribes he found in the Bahamas. These two factors combined to increase the availability and decrease the price of cotton across Europe. In the 1690s, cotton prints were introduced to the British Empire by the East India Company, but the British soon found that their domestic production of fabric could not compete with the cheap cotton fabrics being mass-produced in India. To combat this, the British passed the Calico Act in 1721 that banned domestic use of Indian calicos so that consumers would have no choice but to buy British fabrics. This lasted up until the year 1774, by which time Western machinery had improved enough to compete with the East and for the act to be repealed. Within that time period, the spinning jenny, which was a big machine that can spin multiple yarns at once, was invented in 1738 by James Hargreaves. This took spinning from a cottage industry to an industrialized phenomenon, in part sparking the Industrial Revolution. In addition, Richard Arkwright patented the Arkwright water frame in 1769, which gave the spinner the ability to spin 96 yarns at a time and operated on water power. In 1793, Eli Whitney patented a highly effective form of the cotton gin. Prior to this, cotton was not a very profitable crop for the Western world, as it had to be hand-picked and was extremely labor-intensive. With the addition of the cotton gin, cotton became dramatically more profitable, and landowners switched from tobacco to cotton as their new cash crop. Unfortunately, the new demand for cotton increased the demand for slave labor, so while the American South's export of cotton exceeded the sales of all other American exports combined, it also contributed to a massive humanitarian crisis, the lasting effects of which are still felt to this day. Despite this, Southern plantation owners remained so confident in their crop that cotton diplomacy emerged, which was the idea that the world's economy was so dependent on American cotton that the European allies who benefited from the export of cotton would back up these southern states in case of secession. The idea turned out to not be entirely accurate, as Europe instead turned to Egypt and India for their cotton during the years of the Civil War. Post-Civil War, the economy of the defeated southern United States was in shambles. Without slavery, the South turned to sharecropping, a feudal-like system in which tenants rent land to farm in exchange for a large portion of the crop. This system was in place most of the South up until around World War I, when people began to diversify their industries. Then the mechanical picker was introduced in 1927, which drastically reduced the need for manual labor. As production began to pick up again, European importers went back to the United States for their cotton, leading in part to Egypt's declaration of bankruptcy in 1876 and subsequent British occupation. While all of that was going on, we're going to rewind back to 1854 in Bombay, where the first steam-powered spinning wheel was established. The British saw this idea and brought it to Manchester, where mills began to pop up everywhere. With their newfound manufacturing ability and the high tariffs they began to impose on Indian goods, Manchester became the center of the textile industry, and was even known for a while as Cottonopolis because of all the cotton products that they produced. The ever-increasing mechanization of textile products, including the introduction of power looms, fly shuffles, and jacquard machines, quickly put most of the country's artisan weavers out of business, forcing them to find jobs at the factories with low pay, long hours, and dangerous conditions, where children were often employed. The resulting strikes, demonstrations, and public disturbances from this extreme change in living conditions gave rise to the modern labor movement and inspired Karl Marx's anti-capitalist text, Das Kapital. Though now illegal in the UK and most developed nations, child labor and other forms of worker abuse in the cotton trade remain a problem. While the British Empire was throwing tariffs on their goods, India's cotton industry was suffering. Since the demand had dried up, local mills had to charge more to make up for the lost profit and were beaten out by the lower prices of cotton goods imported from Britain. So in a terrible twist of fate, India actually became the world's largest importer of British cotton goods. So Gandhi began his campaign for self-rule through self-sufficiency by encouraging the boycott of cotton and urging people to instead opt for locally spun fabrics like khadi. The efforts were successful, and the spinning wheel soon became a symbol of Indian nationalism. India's cotton industry has since rebuilt itself, once more becoming one of the world's largest producers of cotton textiles, which is super cool. And this isn't an isolated incident. Trade issues surrounding cotton continue to this day, with US subsidies making it harder for smaller countries to offer competitive prices. As recently as 2003, Brazil filed a dispute with the World Trade Organization, accusing the US of unfair trade practices and dumping. This case was settled in 2014 when the US agreed to pay $300 million in damages to Brazil's Cotton Institute. The African countries of Benin, Burkina Faso, Chad, and Mali, that are known as the Cotton Four, have also been advocating for the lowering of US subsidies because it's been such a problem for them. So anyway, that's kind of cotton in a nutshell. It is a whole can of worms that you may or may not want to open up. This is just scratching the surface, so I encourage you, if you are interested in any part of this video, to go ahead and look up whatever I was talking about, because it's really interesting. There's a lot of history, there are a lot of current trade issues, there are a lot of, there's so many different types of cotton species, different ways to farm cotton. It's really cool. Parts of it are not really cool, but I encourage you to look it up. But that is all for today, and thank you so much for tuning in.